Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for So You Might Want to Be an ANC. What are you getting yourself into? Really glad that so many of you have been able to join us tonight. Not just everyone who's attending, but also all of the current ANC commissioners who are giving up their evenings to talk about what it's like to run and serve in this role. Um, I'm Chelsea Allinger. I'm the executive director of Greater Washington. I've been in this role at GGWash for a little over 5 years now. But more importantly, for the conversation tonight, I served 2 terms as an ANC commissioner in Mount Pleasant between 2019 and 2023. I am going to hand this over to my colleague Matt Girardi to talk us through just some housekeeping and kind of the run of show for the evening.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chelsea, and good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Girardi. I recently came on board to GGWash, very excited to join the team as new DC organizer, dealing specifically with coordinating with our ANCs. I've dealt with some of y'all in previous lives, so to speak, and I'm really excited to be delving into this with y'all tonight. So some housekeeping. Number one, if y'all see, this is a pretty large meeting. We have as of 45 people in attendance right now. Some more folks trickling in, and we expect to trickle in over time to ensure, again, and sorry to read totally off the slide here, to make sure that everybody can get the most out of this. We're asking, I think, the attendees right now, I'm not sure that you can unmute yourselves, but please. Um, Keep yourself muted unless asked to unmute. I'm not sure if that's relevant right here, but use the chat feature. I think the chat should be enabled and raise hand should be enabled for y'all to ask questions of everyone, including all of the ANCs on this panel, myself, Chelsea. Keep discussion. We're going to ask to be on topic, civil, be kind to each other, always be respectful. We're going to have a Q&A portion of the agenda at the end. Please raise your hand to be unmuted and ask a question. We will be happy to promote you to panelist so that you can unmute once we see the raised hand there at the end. Also, we see that should not just say pet cat, that should say all pets. I know that we have some dog owners here. Cameos are to be celebrated, so you may hear some barks and some meows in the background. We are all here for it. As always with these meetings, disruptive trolling behavior is a no-go. And finally, this meeting is being recorded. So just a FYI, if you do come off mute during the Q&A and want to be promoted, we're just giving you a heads up that this is going to be going in our YouTube afterwards. Going to the next slide of our objectives. Right. The objectives of this training are to equip everybody here to better understand how to run for an ANC, Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner, right? Including the deadlines, tips for effective campaigning, better understand what this role entails and what you're getting yourself into, and also know how to serve and work with your neighbors best. And overall, make sure that the next cohorts of ANCs are just positioned to be really good public servants. We do, as many of you may know, have a endorsement process for ANCs here at GGWash. This is not about that whatsoever. This is not related to any particular policy agenda or our endorsement process. This is purely what we view as almost a public service here of making sure that everybody, whoever or wherever they are in the district, can be an effective public servant. So with that, I think I've introduced myself. Matt Girardi, DC organizer with Greater Washington. Chelsea has introduced herself. I want to just do a quick round robin. We'll go in this order, starting with Tony of the commissioners here tonight. If you could please come off mute and introduce yourselves, we would love to hear from you.
Good evening, Tony Goodman, ANC Commissioner for 6C07, which is part of NOMA.
Awesome. Huma?
Hey everyone, Huma Imtiaz, Commissioner of 5E04. I have some part of Bloomingdale and a very tiny sliver of Edgewood in my commission.
Thanks so much. My neighbor. Adam?
Hi, I am Adam Prinzo, Commissioner for 3CO2, which is Woodley Park.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Jeff?
Hi, Jeff Rueckgauer, Commissioner for 2B02, which is West DuPont.
Fantastic. Peter?
Hey everybody, my name's Peter Wood. I am a commissioner in Adams Morgan, 1CO3. So if you frequent Colorado Park or the Green Zone or nearby places, you've been into my neck of the woods.
Excellent. And I think that Robbie may be joining us a little bit later, but Robbie represents HCO6. So yeah, happy to have we have a good group of folks on tonight from all parts of the city. And I'm going to turn it back over to Chelsea to facilitate a little bit of the rest of what we hope is going to be a lively, open discussion here.
Great. Thanks, Matt. We did get a message in the Q&A that the chat wasn't working. It should be now. I think I fixed it. Everybody should have access to the webinar chat. I think we have some other ANC commissioners joining us just as attendees as well. And if so, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And we welcome your participation and thoughts as we move through the discussion tonight as well. So tonight's agenda is pretty straightforward. First, what are advisory neighborhood commissioners? Then, what's involved in running for ANC and how to run an effective campaign? Then we'll spend a decent amount of time talking about being an ANC commissioner, what you can expect from the role, the good, the challenges. We'll get into a lot of different aspects of serving, and then as time allows, we can do some open Q&A. But we also welcome your engagement in the chat. Like if you have questions throughout as we're moving along, please feel free to put them in the chat. Other commissioners who are panelists or who are in the chat, please feel free to engage in the chat in addition to what we're saying verbally. So firstly, what are ANCs? So in a nutshell, this is language that I borrowed from a prior version of the Office of ANC's website, but a few characteristics of advisory neighborhood commissioners. It's a nonpartisan seat. That's why the election's in the general election and not in the primary. Your party affiliation is irrelevant. It's a nonpartisan seat. It is, as the name says, an advisory role. It's not a role that's passing laws or regulations. ANCs, in essence, are serving as their neighborhood's official voice in advising the district government on a whole host of different sorts of issues, which we will get more into. And ANCs can also initiate recommendations on ways to improve their neighborhoods, improve city services. The job, as we'll get into, it really is what you make it, and you could take it as far as you would like in terms of what you can do to really advocate for your neighborhood. I don't think it's on here, but also key, it's an unpaid position. These are elected roles. They are unpaid advisory elected roles. ANCs serve 2-year terms, and you're all here because this is an election year. Also, these are the districts. The districts that neighborhood commissioners represent are called single-member districts. There are 345 single-member districts, which means there are up to 345 commissioners district-wide. If you're not sure which SMD is your SMD, we've got some instructions here. You can go to anc.dc.gov, and in the upper right, you can click to locate your commissioner, or in this case, you're really trying to find your SMD. I'm also a fan of this privately run website, openanc.org, which I think is still maintained. It's another way of searching for your SMD. Okay, now we'll get into the meat of things, and I'm gonna, as much as possible, turn over the discussion to all of my fellow panelists. Running for ANC. Whoops. There we go. So first, the mechanics of how to run, or what it takes to qualify to run. You do have to live in the single member district that you're running in, and you have to have lived there for at least 60 days. Um, you cannot hold another elected public office, and you can't have been convicted of a felony while serving as a commissioner. Any sort of record you might have prior to that, not disqualifying. So July 6th, when you run for ANC, kind of the first official step is to pick up your nominating positions, and July 6th is the first day you can do so. Would anyone who has run more recently than me want to talk a little bit about your experience of picking up your petitions, what that paperwork is like? Um, uh, yeah, just sort of open the floor for kind of your own experiences of running.
I can
I
go
think
first.
I'll
Oh, sorry.
okay, go ahead.
I can go first. Thanks for holding this again training. I actually attended this training 4 years ago before I decided to run for ANC. So this is like a nice full circle moment. I'll say the mechanics are pretty easy. DC Board of Election makes it pretty easy to, most of the information is on the website. They make it pretty easy to do the petition pickup process, and they'll have a Board of Election officer there to walk you through what you need to fill out. I would say, I believe it opens on July 6th this year. So I think, you can go in July 6th, 8:45 a.m. I think is the earliest that they open maybe. But, you go in early, they'll walk you through what you need to do. They'll walk you through how to fill out your forms. And make sure you have things that you need. I will say, getting your petitions and then filing them early can give you an edge. And that's absolutely true because you want to get to 50 signatures as soon as possible. They ask you for 25, but 50 is like a good, healthy buffer to have because you want to make sure you can, get extra signatures, make sure you correct any misinformation, read voters that registered in an old address, all of those things. So yeah, you can get your ballot access documents in person via email. You get all the registered voters in your SMD. You double check it. You protect your personal and yeah, to protect your personal contact information, I set up a Google Voice number and a separate Gmail account that would have all, and that's what I've maintained this whole time. And that's where I do all of my campaign emails, any expenditures, all of that went to that email address. And it was really easy then to keep track of it when you have to file your financial disclosure later in the year.
Thank you, Huma. Tony.
I think another thing to note is that this is an amazing opportunity to work to go door to door and talk to your neighbors. So, you're going to have, ideally, if you're thinking about running, a lot of people in your neighborhood already. You're going to go to them. You're going to ask them to sign, but use this opportunity to knock on as many doors as you can. Later on, if you're on the ballot and you get closer to November, you're going to want to do another big push. But the getting signatures for the ballot is that really first great time where you have something in front of neighbors and you can ask them what sort of issues they're interested in. Great opportunity. The challenge, of course, being that depending on what neighborhood you're in, the row houses are really easy to knock on doors. It's much more difficult with the big buildings. I see I've got one of my constituents is in here who lives close by, but in one of the big buildings, and it's hard to get into those. So sometimes you have to be creative if you have an SMD that is dominated by those big buildings, because if you don't live in one, you can't get access. But that's why you may need to set up at a metro station or coffee shop, just making sure that you're only getting the people that are within your own little SMD.
I will say, as somebody who has only multifamily buildings, that's very accurate. It's very hard to get in them. Luckily, I could just park myself in my lobby for like an hour, but very hard to get into the other buildings that I represent.
And just kind of speaking more broadly, I would say that, this is all great commentary, and you guys said stuff I was already thinking about saying. The campaign process, especially the early on stages, is really, I mean, it's obvious that you want to be organized, but it's also like electorally an important moment to prove that you're capable of getting organized and structuring what you're going to do based on what the Board of Elections says you have to do, and using that as kind of the like chronological bookmarks. But also, like, it's very easy to see very early on, both the campaigning and then if you become elected, to see that your personal and professional life will conflict with being a commissioner. And a lot of times it has to take sort of a back seat, and being able to kind of jump ahead of that curve is to your advantage. So planning out the summer, when do you have non-negotiable trips or obligations? When do you might have some sort of not clarity, and being able to go, okay, at the end of August, I'm not going to be as available to collect signatures, so I'll have to do that early on, or vice versa, and making sure that you're thinking ahead as far as possible, because unexpected things will come up. And ideally, you'll be able to demonstrate that to your potential constituents, that you've thought about these things and you do a good job, one, following the rules, but also following the rules in a way that isn't stiff, and that you can engage with people in your community so they can see you're trustworthy and well organized.
Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah. Another thing that people, in neighborhoods that are large and apartment building centric, pardon me, I got something in my throat. There are a lot of people who live or are neighbors who are not registered to vote in DC, or who haven't bothered, who are not long-term residents, or they're registered to vote somewhere else. And it gets extremely frustrating for a lot of people. I know a few people who dropped out of the last cycle, because they couldn't get 25 signatures in a building that had like 500 apartments. And there weren't many others around them. So it's important to try and not, you really cannot you can't have a thin skin. Rejection, by people blowing you off, don't take it personally. It's just the way that things are. And as somebody else said, set up at a coffee shop, avoid farmers markets, especially the DuPont market, because it has people from pretty much everywhere else but DuPont. So go to places like a local supermarket, for instance. That's local. You're more likely to get local people there than at some big expo. And also something that's a little more fundamental is, why are you running? Is something you need to define for yourself. You need to be able to, if you're going to talk to people to get their signatures, you need to be able to explain to people who you are, what you're about, and what you want to improve in that district. It's real easy to say, well, I really want to help change the neighborhood. Okay, what do you want to do? So it's important to pay attention to what's going on in your neighborhood, have a good understanding of that. What are the major concerns that are going around in DC? Trash collection is not what it should be. Are there concerns with noise? Are there concerns with public safety? And what is the current commissioner doing or not doing to address those issues? And positioning yourself as, I'm going to do my darndest to make things better for all of us. And also be aware that being a commissioner there takes a lot of time. It's not just those, the hour or two of the monthly meeting.
I'm going to pause you right there, Jeff, because
okay,
we've got slides coming up about that specifically. Just on the signature collection front, we're also going to get more into how you can campaign beyond signature collections before, and then we'll get into kind of the role itself. But just a couple of quick points on signature collection. You can pick up your petitions July 6th. The deadline for submitting those signatures is August 5th at 5 p.m. So you won't be done running at that point, but that is the point at which you will need to submit your petitions in order to get yourself on the ballot. One suggestion that I found really effective, I actually did collect most of my signatures at the Mount Pleasant Farmers Market, but I carried a printout of the single member district map for Mount Pleasant with me and ended up having great conversations with neighbors because none of them know what SMD they live in. So I had the map there as a reference, and people could find out in the moment if I was running for the seat where they lived or not. But that's a farmers market that mostly attracts people who live in the neighborhood. So it still worked out to be relatively efficient for me. Huma or Adam, I don't know who had their hand up first.
Yeah,
Huma.
I was gonna say, plus one, I got most of my signatures the first time around at the Bloomingdale Farmers Market, and also it was a lot of good FaceTime with people who, even if they lived in the next SMD over, were made introductions to people who lived in my single member district. I want to say Councilmember Silverman gave me this tip when she was campaigning, but I took a clipboard and taped the map to the back of my clipboard. And that was really helpful. So you have petition sheets on one side, you can flip it over and show the map, and that's really helpful for people to know. I also bookmarked, which is now a handy dandy website of where you can type in your address and look up your SMD right there. So even if folks, if they're on like one side of the street or the other and they don't know and you don't remember off the top of your head, it's also really easy to type it in and put it in there. And Chelsea, maybe I can send it around as like a resource for people, especially when they're campaigning.
I will say the biggest place where, first of all, like I said, my SMD is mostly all multifamily, but it's also a lot of newer DC residents. So you might also need to be prepared to answer that what is an ANC commissioner question, because a lot of people did not know what it was when I first ran. A lot of people did not know what the council was when I first ran. So when you do engage with new DC residents, just be mindful that we do have a rather unique system here. So you might have to be ready to answer that question in addition to why you're running. But I will say a good place for a lot of people with multifamily buildings is a dog park. That's where I got a significant amount of my signatures the first time I ran, because it's a lot of people. Like we have one dog park for like 4 or 5 multifamily buildings in my SMD. So you kind of get a little bit of the cross with the other buildings. Now, granted, like we were all in our own group chat, so like my building would go at 8 and the other building would go at 9 p.m. So I tended to linger a little bit, but a dog park is a very good place to go because you also run into people who are rather already involved in their neighborhood. If they're going to a dog park, most of them have a problem with the way the dog park is being maintained. So it's if you have a dog, use them wisely.
Thanks, Adam. All right. Some extremely subjective advice on running a campaign effectively. First, let's talk a little bit about costs and fundraising. An effective ANC campaign can cost very little. It can cost conceivably nothing. A lot of commissioners self-fund and print out some flyers, and that's about the extent of it. The maximum contribution limit per person is $25, but there's no limit on how much of your own money you can use. We have some data in here. It's a little outdated at this point, 2020 numbers, but still interesting. Where you can see candidates running for ANC back in 2020, 181 of them raised $0. 66 of them raised more than $1,000. So there's a real range. And wondering if each of you could talk a little bit about your experience fundraising or not fundraising, and how that's worked when you've run in the past.
I'll go first. I mean, I think this can vary a lot. And I think that more broadly speaking, this is a good opportunity to try to understand who your constituents are. And by that, I mean, trying to figure out what types of kind of platforms or media are likely to get the attention of the people that you want to vote for you. And some of those things don't cost money. Some of those things do cost money. And some of those things, it's questionable depending on what resources you have access to. Like if you can print stuff on a printer you have access to for little or no cost, that might be sufficient. But if you have, like I had a race where I had 2 competitors and it was for an ANC race, relatively competitive and everyone was really active. And there's, a modest amount of money spent, a few $100s here and there. Some races occasionally will get more, but it's rare. It's usually like in the hundreds of dollars. And that's usually spent on things like signs on the street, which actually can be really helpful. Like some races, it's clear that the person who bought signs got a lot more votes than the person who didn't, and everything else was for the most part equal in terms of their outreach. Or like renting a website or paying for a website and having a website, you can check the traffic. But if you don't think your people in your district are very, for example, likely to be on Instagram and looking at Facebook or Instagram ads or something like that, probably not a good use of money. So trying to figure out what types of constituents live nearby you and what ways best to access them can help you figure out, do you need to ask people for money? And then also you need this kind of the challenge of thinking, who should I ask? Like the how much is not that hard because they can't give more than $25, and they have to be there's certain criteria that the donors have to fill. So they can't be, as far as I know, they have to be U.S. citizens. And actually, I don't know if green card holders at this point can donate. That's a good question because they can vote and run for office. But in any case, you want to make sure you're following the rules and ask yourself, do you want everyone to be a DC resident? They don't have to be, but it's often hard to get a lot of people for an ANC race to donate. A lot of times people will, like for me personally, when I first started, the first like 5 or 10 donors were like high school friends and family that just kind of got the ball rolling. After that, it was people that were living nearby that were more interested, but that can kind of vary. Also, that was during the pandemic, so people were looking at Facebook posts more than letting you come into their living rooms. It took a couple years for that to become more common, right?
I just want to note for a second, before we go to Huma, um, all of us who are on this call right now are speaking about our own personal experiences with running. None of us work for the Office of Campaign Finance. None of us work for the Office of ANCs. So if you do have, so take this for what it is, which is what's worked on a personal level for all of us. But if you do have clarifying questions about how campaign finance regulations work for ANC seats, highly encourage you to reach out to the Office of Campaign Finance directly, reach out to the Office of ANCs directly. I just don't want to, overpromise what we're able to deliver when we're just sharing what our lived experience has been like, serving in this role. Huma.
Yeah, I'll just say for my first campaign, I definitely raised, I think, over 500, but I ended up spending a little bit more. I think, as Peter said, right, like it's a matter of what kind of, I had a competitive campaign the first year. And so I spent, money on postcards as well as signs. And the next campaign, I was able to reuse the signs, whereas I got new postcards printed. I'll just say, like for door-to-door knocking, yes, the signs are really helpful, especially if you're trying to, people don't know who you are. But I would say nothing was more valuable than having literature that I could leave at people's homes. If you're knocking doors, which you will be in the summer, a lot of people are out of town, people are working, depends on what time you knock on their doors. I knocked on the first campaign every door twice. I think I maybe met 30% of people who are actually open the door, right? And so, but leaving the literature, there were a lot of people who said like, oh, I got your postcard. I went to your website. I had a QR code on there that took people to the website. And so just having something you can leave, it doesn't need to be fancy, but just having something you can leave at people's doors is really helpful. So I would say like, that's, if you're looking at how to spend your money, I would absolutely say prioritize things like that versus, like don't do SMS text, like people just don't respond well to that at all. Facebook ads can be, I think it's a matter of like, yeah, if everyone in your neighborhood is on Facebook, sure, but I think digital ads or Twitter ads or Blue Sky ads will not go a long way compared to just that one-to-one in-person interaction.
Jeff.
One of the things that's very important before you decide whether you want to, what kind of campaign you want to run, is to wait until the Board of Elections has posted the final list of candidates for your ANC. And if you have an opponent in the race, then you really need to then sit down and figure out what kind of financing and campaign aids. But if you're running unopposed, it's a very different story. So this is now my fourth cycle, and I have spent $0 each election. Just because you're running unopposed does not mean you need to just be invisible. I mean, yes, you will be. If you get even one vote, you'll win. But you really want to make sure that you get engaged with your neighbors. Get out there, knock on doors, talk to the people on the streets around, in your SMD. And that will help make sure that, that you're just not some, person on the ballot. And it'll make sure that people, are aware that there is a person on the ballot to vote for. And you also might want to look back at your ANC's history of vacancies. You can figure those out through meeting the minutes, and seeing how often there's turnover too, because that's also something that that some people may not understand, that some districts are very difficult to operate, and we've got several in my ANC that are perennials for having a year and a half turnover. Whereas the others, are pretty stable. So, look into that history and then try and figure out whether you really want to deal with it.
Any other thoughts from folks about campaign tactics here? We've got just some options listed here: social media, website, physical posters, mailers, building an email list, and then all these ways that you can meet voters face to face. We've talked a little bit about door knocking already, standing outside the polling place on election day, hosting meet and greets, having your friends and neighbors host meet and greets, hanging out at the farmers market, hanging out on the small business strip in your neighborhood. What has worked for folks? What tactics have you used in the past? Maybe what has worked not so well? And we also did get a question in the chat about platforms people have used and how their experience has been with them, which I'm guessing, Jay, that might be fundraising platforms specifically. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can handle the platform one, or at least give my perspective. There might be other platforms I'm not thinking of, but I have two times I ran without an opponent. So I think I bought signs once, but I didn't do any fundraising. But the first time I did, I used Act Blue. I know some people that use, I think it's Donor Box, if I'm not mistaken, or what's the one? Yeah, I think that's it. Like I said, more of a nonpartisan one. Act Blue is a bit more partisan. There's a Republican one. I assume most people are less interested in that than Act Blue, but there's one if they're inclined to kind of be partisan leaning. My experience was pretty good. They don't do, as far as I know, Act Blue didn't do any sort of purity check to see if you match any sort of ideological anything. They just wanted to see that you're committed to progressive causes and running for local office. The platform itself was pretty easy to use. You can kind of customize a splash page where people can see a video or picture and some sort of kind of spiel about what your campaign is like on the actual Act Blue. You can link to other sites as well. And they just mail checks kind of automatically in the snail mail, and you'd have a physical check to put into a campaign. I kind of overdid it, I think, and I opened up a bank account specifically for my campaign, so all of the donations would go to that. Probably not necessary. I just wasn't sure how difficult some of the adversarial powers that be in my ANC were going to be if they're going to be scrutinizing campaign donations and things. So I was just erring on the side of caution, which is of course always good if you can. But if you're very good with making sure your paperwork is always clear, keeping the expenditures, always making sure you have receipts, keep it organized, and just have it so it's easy for you to later go, this is the money I was given by whom, this is the money that I spent on what. That's what you're going to be asked eventually. So make sure you have that from the onset very clear. Act Blue is a helpful way of doing that because they do a lot of the, of course, donation side of that for you.
Any other thoughts on campaign tactics? What's worked well for folks? Website, social media, physical posters, conversations.
I think
I think
all.
the
Sorry, Tony.
nowadays with so much absentee voting, it's taken away a little bit of the election day, but it's still a really great time. I mean, if you have the opportunity, if you can take off, at least a few hours of work, in the morning and then be there for the evening, it's super super helpful. You'll, and especially if you see people in line, you'll be chatting with them, you'll be having these really nice conversations, and so then that brings in strangers who you haven't met yet, who see you interacting positively with other people. It's really it's your last moment, but to get people before they go in, and you see across, if you look at the election results for past races, there's a lot of undervotes in ANC. There's a lot of people that don't know, that's on the back of the ballot. They don't know who that is. And so just being in front of people on election day, right before they go in to vote, is huge. It's probably, I think, the most important thing you can do. Um, you know, but, of course, less nowadays with absentee, but it's still a really great opportunity.
I just want to add to something Tony said. My first campaign, I wasn't able to stay all of election day, and I asked one of my neighbors very kindly offered to do it for me and handed out postcards, and he said he got like 30 voters in the last hour or so that he was there. And so even if they weren't, like, he was just at that point just handing out literature. And so I think it's just, even if you can't do it yourself, like, that's where your friends can absolutely step up and like help you. Like, all they need to do is be like, hey, as you're going to vote, just hand them some literature so they have something to go in. I'd also say email introductions. Definitely ask your neighbors, hey, is there, or your friends, hey, is there anyone you know who you think I should be talking to? And you'll be surprised to find out how many people are willing to make introductions, and you can have those conversations, because some neighbors will absolutely want to get to know you and know your platform before they decide whether to vote for you and make further introductions. So absolutely recommend asking people like, hey, is there someone you could introduce me to?
And I'll add too a thing that I've done a few times with other candidates in Adams Morgan, and this is like stepping back a bit. It's like you can apply this to different neighborhoods, but the details will vary because, of course, the people in the neighborhoods will vary a little bit. Look, I thought of ways that could get people to want to be informed and kind of broaden out besides just this tiny little chunk of DC that is the SMD I was running for, but at least the neighborhood, get people together. The first time I ran, I think I got all of the new candidates who were running, and we did a virtual kind of meet and greet type of thing with all of us. It was more or less this format of this event right now, except a little bit less informational. There's another time where I think it was across Ward 1, if I'm not mistaken. I should remember this because I organized it, but we did a bike ride route and had people join us with candidates riding bike route in different types of, protected, unprotected, and very unprotected bike lanes across the ward to, one, see the infrastructure, and then two, meet the candidates that were running for office, and as well as meeting other people in the neighborhood. Stuff like that can be really good. If you have people like dogs, doing something dog oriented. If you have people that have a lot of children, something that's children oriented. Like, there's a lot of different options. Make sure that, I guess one caveat is, if you're doing something in a DC park, or if you're thinking about doing something in a DC park, try to avoid that. Technically, you can't do any electioneering on the public spaces like that. There's a lot of rules like that which people will very commonly break, and I don't think it's enforced well. But on the record, make sure you're following the rules and try to find places. Like, sometimes they'll be like in lobbies of hotels or apartment buildings or wherever you can find a spot. But being able to find spaces where you're allowed to use it and gather can be really helpful, just to meet people in the neighborhood. And doesn't, of course, you want people that can vote and donate and stuff like that, but you never know who else to meet because you're kind of broadening that span a little bit.
Great. I just want to pause for a second and welcome Commissioner Robbie Woodland, who has been able to join us. Thank you so much. Robbie, do you want to just take a second to introduce yourself and let us know what part of the district you represent?
Yes, awesome. Hi, my name is Commissioner Robbie Woodland. I ran in 2018, was the first time I ever ran to be a commissioner. And I live in Ward 8, and my single member district is 8C06. I am happy to see so many people on the meeting tonight who is interested in getting into DC politics. I can't wait to have a conversation about it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Robbie.
Yes, ma'am.
So we are just in the midst of talking about advice on running an effective campaign, and folks have been sharing their experiences. I cannot remember if this next slide continues that. No. Okay. So let's any final thoughts, because I kind of paused us there for a second on running an effective campaign, what's worked for you, or tactics maybe that didn't work as well as you expected them to, and that you wouldn't try again the next time around.
Oh, yes. Okay. So one of the things that didn't work so well for me was the whole email blast. Yeah. You know, when you're running for a campaign, you get so many email blasts. It's constant. People really don't like it that much, the email blast. The thing that was more effective for me was being very grassroots, going door to door, knocking on the doors, introducing yourself to the residents, and just being very honest about who you are and what it is that you're trying to do in your community. You want to make sure that you keep your integrity intact. Your integrity is a big thing, your characteristics, because you have to remember that you are dealing with a lot of people who have issues with politicians and community activists not being there for them when they really need it. So you have to keep that in mind when dealing with people and just be as honest as you possibly can. I'm sorry about the background noise.
No problem. Thank you so much for that. Anyone else? Anything we didn't cover on campaigning, on the experience of campaigning? Adam.
Yeah, I just saw the Q&A about apartment buildings, and I would just like to reiterate, like, it's very hard to obviously campaign. Um, Something that I've seen, and I've used a little bit more now that I'm running for my third term, is if you could get somebody in the other buildings that you know. So the previous ANC couple previous before me actually lives in one of my neighboring buildings, and once I met him, he started to circle a petition for me and stuff like that. So it's not it makes it very hard for non-single family homeowners to people running in those districts. But like I parked myself in the lobby, I used the dog park. Like there are places that you can go. Wouldn't use it as I wouldn't view it as like it makes it disqualifying that you live in a multifamily building because it's definitely not. Does it make it harder? Absolutely. But if anybody has any other questions about that, like I'm happy to talk about my experiences. I know like most people usually have a mix of both, and it's very rare that you have the only multifamily buildings, but it makes it more fun. But definitely like use the public spaces that you can legally use. If your building is willing to let you sit in the lobby like mine was, then definitely take advantage of that because you do get people on their way home from work or leaving for work and things like that. So definitely try to figure out a place where you could just park yourself.
Jeff.
Yeah, dovetailing what Adam said, getting to know if there are uh, condo associations in some of those large buildings, or if there is a tenant association in those buildings, and then reaching out to them to hold an event, to have a meet and greet, and that makes it a lot easier, to get into those places. I noticed in the Q&A someone asked about if you a building you don't live in. Never go into a building you don't live in uninvited. That's called trespassing, and some places can get real surly about that.
Thank you, Jeff. I want to just go back a few slides quickly in response to one of the questions in the chat, just trying to make sense of single member district numbering. Oh, this map is not as useful as I thought it would be. But yes, single member districts, I represented when I was in office 1D05, and 1D referred to the overall commission area, which in my case encompassed Mount Pleasant, and 05 was my little tiny single member district within 1D. And at the time, 1D had 5 commissioners in total. So we all sat on the 1D commission together. None of us was like a master commissioner more important than anyone else, but your neighborhood, you are not just serving as a commissioner all by yourself. You represent your little tiny district of 2,000 people by yourself, but you are part of a commission that what is the range in commission size at this point? It used to range from like 2 to 13. I think maybe it's not quite that extreme. 2 to 10? 2 to 10 people. And so there will be a commission chair, um, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, that sort of role on the commission. Anyone else want to tease out that sort of structure a little bit more? That would have been making a mental note, that would have been good to have a slide for.
Yeah. So the way that or demystifying what is an SMD name. The first position is the ward. So you have 1 through 8. D is or for instance, A, B, C, D. That represents the number of roughly 20,000 residents. So the segments of it. And then each SMD is broken down as approximately 2,000 residents in a given area. And each of us represents that roughly 2,000 members. So an ANC itself, meaning all of the SMDs included, can be, about 20,000 people.
Thanks, Jeff. Did I see someone else's hand on this? No. Okay. Jumping back ahead. Okay. Congratulations. You got elected. Now what? I don't know if I have any Parks and Rec fans in the room. It should possibly be mandatory viewing before you serve in local government in any capacity. But yes, when you become an ANC commissioner, you will learn very quickly that a lot of people care a lot about their neighborhood. Usually not yelling, thankfully. All right, let's talk a little bit about what the role actually looks like. What does the time commitment look like? This can vary significantly based on what's happening in your commission area. Are you in kind of a quiet, sleepy neighborhood? Are you in an area with lots of development happening? Does your ANC have paid administrative help or not? Yes, that is a thing that a lot of commissions have, because your commission has a fair amount of paperwork to do of all sorts, and we could get into that a little bit. So some have hired part-time admins to help. If you're an officer or a committee chair, we haven't talked about committees yet. You might have more of a time commitment. And how much are you proactively trying to push things forward in your neighborhood versus taking a more responsive approach to things that come your way? The time commitment, it could be limitless. I mean, you could make this your full-time job. Don't let it unless you really truly have nothing else going on in your life. The temptation there can it can be real. There is so much you could do, but you are not a full-time paid council member with a team of staff. You are a neighborhood resident who cares about your community and is trying to squeeze this in and do the best you can around the rest of your life. I'm gonna get off my soapbox now and would love to hear from everyone else. What does the time commitment look like for you? We can start with Robbie.
Oh, yes, thank you so much. I love everything that you just said. Okay, I am a case manager by trade. So I'm used to dealing with a lot of different clients. I won't say that it was easy to kind of set my schedule, but you really have to think about what your best openings and everything are during the week and then work through that in that kind of way. What worked for me was the streets that are in my single member district. Like once you know your complete area, you can divide that up. When you want to go out and introduce yourself to the residents and you want to just go out and just make sure that your face is in the area. I'm not saying do that every day of the week, of course, but you do want to go out inside your community so that they can see that you're around. They know that you're there. They feel comfortable with that. And then you kind of want to just separate everything. One of the things you are going to be getting emails on a regular basis from all kinds of government agencies. The other thing is you're going to be getting emails directly from residents or telephone calls from residents. and they are going to want you to jump in. So by the time they reach out to you, they are already at their wits' end. They have done everything that they can humanly possibly do, and they're looking for an immediate resolve because they've been dealing with this issue for quite a while. So then you just jump in. But it's just very important that you just keep your wits about you and you create a schedule that makes sense according to your lifestyle. I hope I said that good.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Adam.
Um, so I usually like to tell people that this role is what you make of it. So I am lucky enough that I work a flexible job, so I can kind of jump and be a little more flexible with where I can and can't be during the workday, which is not the case for everybody. But I definitely, you have to, I was very bad about saying no at first, about when people would ask, like, oh, well, would you mind doing the Woodley Park Community Association meeting every month? But I've grown to love them. But do I really want to do that every second Tuesday for 4 hours because they just like to sit there and talk? So it definitely is what you make it. Now, I will say the struggle for me at first was when I first ran, I was not working a flexible job, but you'll notice that you do get emails from people that work for DC government 9 to 5 because that's obviously their work day. So you just have to make sure that if you can't respond to an email or if you can't go to something at a specific time, like make sure you just become an advocate for yourself as well as your community. They tend to understand, like, I have a real job. This is not my real job. So if you answer them after workday, then, after your workday, then they'll get back to you the next day. So just be mindful of that because like when I first logged into my ANC email on the first day that I was sworn in, there was 15,000 unread emails in there. And I was like, but just, like most of them, thankfully were not of importance, but definitely like make sure that you're not putting yourself in a position where this has become a full-time second job that's not paid.
Thanks, Adam. Jeff.
Yeah, there are a lot of times time management is the devil of the details. You need to set limits for knowing how much you do have to do for your real job, how much is left over for this, for being a commissioner, and also don't forget that you have a personal life. You've got family, you've got friends, and they deserve your attention too. One of the things that's important is to set limits, in a gentle manner with your constituents. And you try to get people to understand that they should not come to you before anybody else. If they are having a problem with trash pickup, have they reached out to 311 yet to find, to report it? So, because a lot of people will expect you to be the help desk who is going to do all of the work for them. And then you've got the other type of person who has lots of people in the Wilson building on speed dial and come to you as an afterthought. They've already set the fire alarms going downtown with your council member or somebody or sometimes the chairman, and then they call you up as an afterthought and want you to do something about it. But don't tell you that they've spoken to other people, and then you find out that everybody else is already doing this. So why are you coming to me? So you need to figure out a way that's comfortable for you and that's not going to upset too many people out in the woods. That try to reach out to the agency or to 311. Try to work there. If you're not getting a result, that's when they come to you, and you then can try and intervene. And if that doesn't work, then you can escalate it. But make it clear. Don't call up the council member and then call me up after you've done that, and you're still not getting any results. I don't have any. We don't have any magical powers that supersede any of the electeds higher up. It can be a challenge doing that because a lot of people have this, have the nature of I want to be, I don't want to be confrontational. I want to, be cordial and and understanding. But it's really important that you learn to put your foot down and just kind of maintain boundaries. If you have a website, put it on the website. If you know how I can best help you. So they understand that there's a process and refer people to it. If you don't do that, have a newsletter and get people's, make sure you get as many people as possible on it, and circulate that on a regular basis and have that in there as well, how to best help you.
And
Thanks, Jeff. We are going to get more into the specific responsibilities of ANCs and the sorts of work that comes across your desk, so to speak, most frequently. But if there are other thoughts specifically on the time commitment, would welcome those. This, I think, ends up being a real one of the toughest aspects of the role, honestly, is time management.
I just wanted to reiterate that point about the, that people are going to come to you when they have already been to a council member, an agency, or maybe they haven't yet. And a good way I found is of phrasing it when talking to a constituent is saying that in order to be, remind them, in order to be the most helpful you can be, you need the full context of the issue and the full context of what's happened so far. So it's not just simply, and not saying that you'd said that, but it's not just simply saying, sorry, I don't want to help you, or I can't help you until you've first gone them. It's just saying, hey, can you please explain the situation more? Explain who you've talked to. What have they said? Is there anything you can forward? Especially with the 3-on-1 requests. It's saying, hey, if you can put in the 3-on-1 request, give me that number, then I can push that number. Because people will want to go straight to you and not go through that process, but you frame it as it's the best way that you can help them.
And I'll just add kind of quickly about time commitment. So, I mean, my experience, I think I got kind of lucky because this can vary a lot. But like I was saying earlier, during the campaign season, I made sure to try to get to know all the other people who were running for the positions in the same ANC. One, just as a courtesy, but two, you kind of get a feel for who you kind of mesh well with. And it's not always on ideological lines. Like, it's surprisingly, there'll be times just like, oh, we get along very well. But if we were to do one of those political alignment tests, we might not necessarily agree very clearly, but we both want to do things that are civically engaged and good for the community. And that was really helpful because when it comes to the time commitment, depending on, people's employment situations, et cetera, having people that can kind of take up slack for you or vice versa can be really helpful. So if you collectively, I can mean as little as two people, can try to find ways to, oh well, this agency is only going to be doing stuff during these hours that only one or a few of us are available in. You can kind of switch off and make sure that at least somebody's there. And then the second part is communicating that well and clearly to the other commissioners and constituents. But doing as much of the sharing, of course, like this is a bigger conversation of like who's represented and how do we share these responsibilities and how do we get people who have, for example, menial labor jobs represented. That's another conversation. But if you're fortunate enough to have people that you develop some trust with, try to take advantage of that and share it as well, because it can go a long way.
Just the last thing I would say is if you do end up getting elected as an officer once you become an ANC commissioner, definitely reach out to others who have done that role. I think it's helpful to get like some best practices, things that worked for them, things that didn't, whether they do email templates for minutes or they have like a great system for being a treasurer, right? Like it's really helpful to talk to people who have been in the role so you can find out like, okay, what is realistic? What do I actually need to do? When does it need to be done by? Because some of that stuff like you get handed a guidebook, but it's still it's not a comprehensive guidebook for everything, and it's not going to be a one shoe fits all solution there. So it's just really helpful to talk to people who have done the role to just to get a better sense of things.
Thank you, Huma. That was a great transition to this slide. What sort of work is involved? So here are some broad categories, some of which we've already talked about quite a bit. So we've spent a decent amount of time talking about providing constituent services and steering people toward 311 or other sources of help that might be more appropriate, or at least the place to start. We haven't really talked about the monthly meetings, resolutions, which are kind of the main thing that commissions do. Serving on committees. Some commissions have more committees or more active committees than others. Let's start there. Let's start with resolutions, monthly public meetings, and serving on committees. Anyone kind of want to provide a little bit of an introduction to what your experience has been like with those? And I'll start with Adam, whose hand I think went up first.
Yeah. So I will say our monthly public meeting is probably my favorite meeting because we have a great chair in 3C and our meetings probably last no more than 45 minutes and it's amazing. But that's because we switched our work to we do all the preliminary work in our committee meetings, which lasts roughly about an hour. I will say drafting a resolution, we've switched a little bit more recently to a letter format, which is the same thing as a resolution, except we just say like, hey, DDOT, this is what we want instead of doing all the whereases and the therefore be it resolved clauses. Just because we felt like it was a more effective way for people reading it to just be like, this is what they want. They don't really need the background since most time it's the agency that's asking us for our input anyway. But I will say, like, I am a co-chair or a chair of, I think, 6 out of the 7 or 8 committees that we have. It does add a little bit of extra work, but the work is meaningful. So like for our ABCA stuff or alcohol licenses, we put that all in our economic development committee. They meet, they discuss the ABCA license. People can come and talk about, why they don't like it or why they do like it. And so then when we get to the full meeting, it's not the same. Somebody's coming to talk about why they do like something or not like something. So I just think that was an effective way for us to do things. Obviously, that's not how everybody works, but it's easier for us to draft the resolution when we do the work before the meeting because we get the public input at those committee meetings and we can bring that to the resolution that we then vote on in the public meeting. So like we recently had an incident with a bus layover zone that they were trying to put on, DDOT and WMATA were trying to put on Connecticut Avenue, or still are. So we were able to have them come to our transportation meeting. We were able to engage with a lot of neighbors who were upset. And we were able to draft a better resolution because we kind of knew all sides of the angle or the issue up front, as opposed to, well, now we're in the public meeting and we have to make, 27 amendments because, well, now somebody's bringing an issue to us. So definitely before you draft a resolution, talk to people. Just don't do it in a silo. Talk to your fellow commissioners, talk to neighborhood associations, talk to your neighbors. But for us, I've seen like how we've been able to be a little bit more effective with what our asks are because we have a better understanding of what people want. And we've also at times just pointed the agencies, like when they come back to us with a question, we're like, here's the link to the meeting. So watch it. But definitely like do your engagement before the meeting because I've seen it where people are trying to do it at the meeting and I just feel like it makes it a little bit more confusing.
Thank you, Adam. I know we have a lot of hands up. I just want to zoom it out a little bit more for folks who are maybe like not following some of the acronyms, not, there's a big learning curve when you become a commissioner. It's okay to not know all the acronyms right now. It's okay to not really understand what a resolution is. We'll get to everybody's hands, but I'm wondering if some of the panelists and also commissioners who are in the chat, if you could just drop in the chat, what are the committees that your ANC has, rather than us going through and listing all of them, just to give people a flavor, because the committees can vary a little bit across commissions, and I think can give you a sense of the flavor of the sort of work that happens within committees just by virtue of what issue areas they're covering. And also, so while that's happening, for when I served, my commission had no committees. That's also an option. I think it's a less common option, but it is an option. Um, and while folks are doing that, would anyone feel comfortable kind of offering up a layperson's definition of a resolution as like the official action that ANCs take?
I'm happy to do that. So I think it's important to note that a single member district, an ANC commissioner, does not have great weight on their own. So great weight is when an ANC, so the ANC as a whole, writes a letter, takes an action, does something to, try to get an agency to take, to take actions. They don't have to go along with what the ANC says, but they do need to respond to it. And they do need to, say why they're not going along with it, basically. So as an individual commissioner, you will send stuff to agencies. You will often get responses. You will often get stuff done. But the ANC as a whole, when they vote and there's a majority vote on something, then you can send a letter. And that's one of the biggest things that we do is to influence. You're as an individual commissioner, you're doing a lot of constituent service stuff. But as an ANC as a whole, the ANC is writing letters for the Public Service Commission, which regulates transportation related things when it comes to buildings and construction, or you have an alcoholic beverage license application, or you have a zoning application. And so the ANC as a whole can vote, write a letter, and that letter then has what people will refer to as great weight.
Thanks, Tony. Robbie.
Yes, thank you. I think it's also important to note that the government doesn't have to accept your great weight either. I mean, you can do the resolution, you can send it over to wherever agency you want to send it to. It's up to them if they choose to take that or not. Even though the ANCs do get great weight, sometimes they go with it, sometimes they don't. So they can make their mind up on that. If you go to the Office of the Attorney General for the District of Columbia's website, there is resolutions that has been passed that the Office of the Attorney General keeps on their website. So you can go there, you can look that information up, you can kind of read through the resolution so you can see how resolutions are normally formatted, what some of the issues are in regards to that. Another thing is that you can also, depending on what it is that you're trying to do, well, let's just say for me, I really don't count on my commission too much to do a lot of the things that I want to do. You kind of have to decide the kind of commissioner you want to be. And you also develop these relationships with different people, government agencies, and then you tell them what it is that you would like to have happen in your area. And a lot of the times you can get these things done without commissioner support for your single member district. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. Jeff.
Oh, sorry, I was muted there. Some of the things that don't necessarily get as much attention is that when you're serving on the commission, it really does fall upon you to do your legwork about an issue that's originating in your SMD. Whether it's an APCA application or a zoning or historic application, a lot of times, if the commissioner who's responsible for an SMD doesn't engage and doesn't provide input, it really creates more work for the rest of the commission. So it's really important that you become comfortable with writing a resolution, which means talking to your constituents and distilling those conversations into a recommendation that becomes a starting point for how, if there is a committee, that the committee can then start from there and build up from that. It does not help committees or other commissioners, if you don't have committees, to then have to do all of that legwork from scratch. So, and it's not pretty. It's really frustrating for a lot of people because, oh my gosh, I have to, figure out this thing. But that really does fall into the responsibility of the SMD. And I've encountered a number of situations where where there are SMDs who are unwilling to do that work. They just show up for the main meeting and that's it. their issues, maybe they may come up in a committee, but then you've got those constituents who are most directly affected are then apoplectic because nobody talked to them about it in advance. So maintaining open channels with your constituents in your district is really a very important part of the job. And depending on what an issue is, sometimes it's like, hey, what do you think about, XYZ wants to, open a restaurant here. Some places are, totally cool and totally, with it. Other areas can be real. You've got, they're showing up with the pitchforks and the torches, because how dare you want to open up, nightlife in our neighborhood, kind of a thing. So I mean, the responses are all over the map, but it's really important, to do your own legwork, because that helps the whole commission come to a good decision that will, may not make everybody happy, but at least gave everybody their chance to be heard, and their input, was valued.
Thank you, Jeff. Huma.
Yeah, I thought it might be helpful to run through like what a meeting looks like. If it's helpful for folks to hear, you'll do some administrative stuff at the top of the meeting. Bills, a big part of it is bills and reimbursements. So, commissioners can apply for reimbursements for expenses that occur. There's like a whole list of categories and all of those things. You hear presentations from government agencies, including your council member's office as well. And then you also have a chance to ask agencies to present, right? If you, for example, have outstanding issues with, say, DP, Department of Public Works, you can ask them to send a representative. You have ongoing DC water work that is creating issues for residents. You can ask them to send a representative, right? So it goes both ways. Agencies will reach out a lot and say, hey, can we present at your ANC meeting? Or you can reach out to them as well. And then you have, the ANC business of passing resolutions, letters, responding to zoning applications, APCA applications, and all of those things. And that's usually, and then, there's some time for community comments, and every commission sort of structures it differently, but that's sort of the rundown of how one of these meetings works. I will add, I forgot who said it, but I think setting boundaries is really helpful. I think Adam was talking about this in the beginning, but setting boundaries is really helpful. Meetings, ANC meetings can run anywhere between 1, and I've heard as up to 5 hours, right? And so think about how many meetings you have to attend, most of the ANC meetings. I think you're allowed committee rules. Every commission has rules about it, about how many you can skip. But you can't have unexcused absences. You can't miss every commission meeting. But I would say you should prioritize commission meetings for sure, but then also think about like, do I need to attend every civic association meeting? Do I need to hold my own solo meetings? Like really think about what your own schedule looks like to preserve your own sanity. You cannot be everywhere all at once.
Thank you, Huma. And for those of you who are attending tonight, if you haven't attended an ANC meeting in your neighborhood, highly, highly recommend that you do before you run for a seat. The monthly meetings are open to the public. And if you do decide you're not quite ready to run for ANC, your commission might have committees that are looking for community members to join those committees, and that can be another way to begin to engage. We do have a number of additional slides. So I will, Peter and Robbie would love to hear from you, but maybe we can keep them brief instead so that some of these points will come up on later slides too.
Oh, I see. One do you think is, but I was going to kind of holistically give the context for like bring all this stuff together. I can do that later if you want. Do you think that's good?
No, go for it.
Okay. Okay. So I mean, I'll try to be brief. This could go on way too long. It won't, I promise. I mean, so like stepping back, just kind of bringing this back to the question of what is it that ANCs do, the commission and the individual commissioners. So like quick history lesson, like for a long time, DC didn't have elected representation, right? So and there's a lot of very qualified people on this. So if I get anything wrong, please put it in the chat. But in the 70s, as a compromise for a lot of things, and this is like very oversimplifying it, DC gets an elected mayor, gets an elected council, and gets this thing called commissions, which, if I'm not mistaken, came from this idea from like Minnesota, where it's this idea of hyper-local representation. My like opinion is that it was an ingenious way of getting a lot of unpaid staff for the city to do constituent outreach, and a lot of people who are like drawn to the position will do a good job with that. By law, like I always remind myself and our commission that like there's a tier of things that define what it is we have to do, and then after that, what we want to do is a little bit different. First, like the Constitution of the United States, but then more locally, DC Code. What does the DC Code say? And then the bylaws for your commission, and those can vary a little bit by commission, but in general, they're usually pretty similar. And then Robert's Rules of Order, which is essentially like parliamentary procedure. So how your meetings are run and a little bit of other stuff that kind of guides how your commission, and then by kind of extension, the individual commissioners should behave, following these rules, kind of filling in the gaps for what's in the law and what's in your bylaws. We only have to have, by law, we main thing have to have 9 meetings per year or more, which is really to say that the commissions exist as a way for people that live in DC to go to find someone and say stuff. Usually that's complaining, but not always. Sometimes it's good faith, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just people wanting to understand how things work better, but to have some sort of gathering where people can go and say, this is what I feel, this is my lived experience, this is what I want. And then as commissioners, it's up to us to figure out what we want to do with that information or our perception of that information, because we can't hear from everyone always. So you got to do a little bit of guesswork of what we think people need and how to get that. A lot of that is basically thinking, okay, who in DC government, and with some specific exceptions, federal government, can we go to actually get this done? Who has money, budget, staff? Who's someone who's actually good at responding to emails? And then trying to develop those relationships so we can get that stuff to happen, or in some cases not to happen. But that's what we have to do. And that the meetings, how we structure it, as you've heard, varies by the kind of preferences of the commission. And that can be having a lot of committees, it can be having no committees, it can be having a lot of meetings and long ones, it can be having a lot of short ones. That can vary a lot, but we need to listen to people. And then kind of beyond that, we need to communicate them somehow. So I think DC law just says it has to be in writing. So it can be a letter, it can be a resolution. But you need to put it in writing at a meeting that's given, a proper amount of time and notice. And there's specific rules of how you get that notice to happen. It can be virtual, it can be physically on boards in the neighborhood. But you want people to know that the meetings happen when they happen, that people have equal opportunities or equitable opportunities to attend those meetings, and at the very least email you or something or call you to tell you what they want to happen based on the agenda items, and then communicate that to people. And there's a bunch of other rules I won't get into details with, but that's in a nutshell, bringing this stuff together, and then the details matter. I think that's what we're going to go into now.
Thank you, Peter. Robbie.
Yes, very quickly. For those interested in running, Robert Rules of Order will be your best friend. That is going to tell you how all meetings are structured. It's going to explain to you how you're supposed to vote and what a quorum is. For example, if you have 7 commissioners, then 4 commissioners is for the quorum. If you have 8, then 5 commissioners are the quorum. If you can get the book, Robert Rules of Order, that will be great. If you can't, they have a lot of free information online, and you can go to YouTube and you can look up a lot of videos that kind of show you how the meeting structure and how the voting process is supposed to work. The last thing is your meetings. You as a commissioner can have your own public meetings. You don't necessarily have to have all of your meetings with your commission. I have my own public meetings on Zoom, and I make sure my seniors can call in. So you can pretty much decide what kind of commissioner you want to be and then structure it how you choose.
Thank you, Robbie. So I feel like this is the point in the evening where some of the folks in the room might be starting to feel pretty overwhelmed. And I just want to reassure you that you do not need to know all of this on day one. You do not need to remember 87% of the things that we are saying tonight. The point of tonight and our conversation together is to give you a flavor of what this role is about so that hopefully you walk away with a little bit of a better sense of, oh, that sounds kind of interesting, actually. Or like, that sounds terrible. I never want to deal with Robert's Rules of Order. Um, you will learn, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit more, but you will have an opportunity to get your feet under yourself and learn how to do the role and how to do it well once you're elected. You don't need to understand the finer points of all of these things tonight. I promise you. So I'm gonna move us on. So we have some examples here of the sorts of work that tend in a little bit more detail. Some of this we've already gotten into that tends to come across ANC, the ANC desk somewhat frequently. Um, but we have one topic that I want to touch on before Tony has to drop off. So if you will all just bear with me for a moment. I want to see how many slides up this was. Okay. We're gonna, as you can see, we're gonna talk a little bit about the other sorts of work that come across your desk, what it takes to be a good ANC, and what powers do ANCs have. So I'm going to jump ahead for a moment to one form of power that ANCs have, and I think this stage of the conversation will start to answer some other questions that have come up. But this slide is about PUDs, and I promise you this is as technical as we're going to get tonight. We're only going to spend maybe 3 or 5 minutes on this topic, but if you live in a commission area where this is a thing that happens, I think it is helpful for us to touch upon. So I'm going to hand this over to Tony, who has worked on PUDs in his role as a commissioner, to kind of talk us through that experience for a couple of minutes.
Great, thanks. So, yeah, so as mentioned at the top, I'm a commissioner in NOMA, but I am now a commissioner in NOMA. When I was my first term as commissioner, starting 2011, I had NOMA. So, like, we had all of that. My old boundaries were North Capitol to New York to Florida to 8th Northeast, working its way down to H. That has now been split up into parts of 7 different SMDs. There were a lot of projects, a lot of PUDs. So as I said, these are projects that are asking for more extreme zoning relief. So more extreme variations from what the zoning typically allows. As a result, the more that a project is asking for, if it's currently, you can go 3 stories of industrial and they're asking to do 12 stories of residential, then it's an expectation by the zoning commission that they are providing certain community benefits. I think it's important to note that you can support that project. I mean, I supported all of those pretty much, but you want to make sure that you're using those to your advantage to get additional amenities for the neighborhood that are important to you and your constituents. Those can range from the common things that I've asked for and I've gotten, and that others have asked for, are things like bike share station, public benches, public artwork, playable art sculptures, additional metro fare gates. There's in the past a lot of commissioners have asked for like money for community groups. I think that's where it gets really problematic. That's where it's something that can be a little more difficult. But when you're asking for real tangible things, especially things that will benefit the residents of that building and the residents of everyone else, I think that's where you can have a lot of success. Yeah, as mentioned, also traffic mitigation requirements and PUDs. So that's something where, I've gotten bike share stations, things like that. If you're asking for reduced parking, or if you're asking for additional affordable housing, then you're going to have a situation where you have people who are less likely to have cars. And so it's very reasonable to then mitigate that by getting more pedestrian improvements and things like that. The important thing in this is to be proactive. And it's the same thing as when you have a liquor license application in front of you or something else. You don't have to wait. In all cases, not just PUDs, in all cases, you don't have to wait for a developer or a business or a government agency to come to you with a problem or a project. You can go to them first. And the earlier you go, the more likely you are to actually get changes made. One example, if you've been to the NOMA Metro, and on the east side of the tracks, there is a building that goes from M up to Florida, this big triangular building, huge triangular building along the tracks. And there's a huge hole in the bottom in line with N Street Northeast, where it hits 3rd. It's a hole, it's 80 feet by 40 feet. And that is designed for a future entrance to the NOMA Metro. And that sort of thing, it would have been an absolute fortune if I would have asked the developer to do that after they've already designed the project. So as soon as the landowner said that they were going to develop that, I reached out to their land use attorney and said, hey, whenever you develop, this is what I want. I want more affordable housing. I want public art, and I want a giant hole in the bottom of that building for a future metro entrance. Sort of thing that if we would have waited for them to design their building, they would have said, no, that's ridiculous. By going to them early before they started design, it was not a big deal. They incorporated into the design. And so be proactive, know what sort of things you want, and have that list ready to go of there's a project you're not aware, there's a project that does come up, the extra little things like buying down the affordable housing so that you had a bunch of units at 60%. If you can't think of anything else, say, well, I want some at 30% of the average income for the area, not just 60%. Or you say like, I want a bike share station, which by the way is around $125,000 payment to DDOT. So yeah, it's the sort of thing that very useful for a PUD, but also, I got a few years ago, I got the Heritage Foundation to pay for one when all they were asking for was they were asking for zoning relief, but not a PUD. And same thing with any sort of restaurant, anything like that. If you have opinions about how they will orient their outdoor seating, if it's on this residential street or on this more commercial street, if it's on a corner, if you have opinions, don't wait for an application to come to you. Reach out to developers, reach out to business owners, reach out to agencies, tell them what sort of things you want. And the earlier you get in there, the more likely it is that it can be incorporated into a project or into a business.
Thank you, Tony. I really appreciate that very brief overview of PUDs, which could be a multi-day seminar unto itself. Most of you will not have to navigate a PUD in a given term. Depends a lot on what's happening in your part of the city. So we're not going to belabor this topic tonight. I'm going to jump back to what tends to cross most commissioners' desks most frequently. But it is important to at least put this on your radar because it can be one of the points in time where an ANC has a little bit more power than normal potentially to influence the neighborhood.
Yeah, and thanks so much for everything tonight. If anyone has any questions for me, it's 6007, so 6007 at anc.dc.gov. Best of luck to all of you. Hopefully many of you run, and hope to have you as fellow commissioners in the future.
Thanks, Tony. All right, so what comes across an ANC's desk most frequently? I'm not going to read through this list bullet by bullet. I would actually like to hear from my fellow panelists. What comes across your desk most frequently? Is it something that you see here? Is it other things? Peter,
Robbie had her hand up first, so I'll let her go first if you want. Yeah.
Robbie.
Thank you so much, Peter. I appreciate you. Oh, well, what comes across my desk the most? I have one of the most dangerous communities in my single member district after the rezoning, and that is what is called Congress Park over here in Ward 8. In Ward 8, my biggest concern that come across my desk is a lot of the violence issues. I go out to a lot of murder scenes. I go with the police to make home notifications, and I've even attended some murder scenes where kids that have actually been in my household with my kids had passed away. So those are the biggest things that come up in my issue. I mean, in my single member district is quality of life issues greatly. Quality of life, a lot about the shooting and about the landlords who don't do enough to try to get some of the people off of the property that brings a lot of the violence there. Yeah.
And so I'll do a little bit of, I think I'm probably well qualified to talk about liquor license for a second, just because Adams Morgan, right? But I mean, kind of talking about PUDs and is a similar topic to where one of the things that comes across, at least our commission a lot, is that businesses will be applying for permission to sell alcohol in some capacity. I'll add the caveat that since roughly January last year, the amount of stuff that we've had as a commission, I don't know how common this is citywide, but people are building less buildings or doing less renovations and fewer businesses are opening, probably related to, the geopolitical situation that our world is facing regarding the White House. But when the times were more or less normal, businesses want to come and either, Adams Morgan is weird because there's a thing called a moratorium zone here. I won't get into the details of what that is, but there's rules about who can sell alcohol and when. And in most cases, and this is something that I had to kind of learn along the way, which you don't really need an ANC's support to be able to sell alcohol in the long term. The only time you actually, like by law, as far as I was told by ABCA, the Alcoholic Beverage and Cannabis Administration staff, the only time you actually need ANC to like add a meeting with quorum and duly noticed, et cetera, that you need that support is something called a stipulated license, which is basically if a business wants to sell alcohol while they're waiting for the alcohol license to get finalized for the most part, that you need to have it so that the neighbors, which in this case would be represented by the commission, are okay with that. And kind of like PUDs, that's an opportunity to have some, like really one of the only opportunities over businesses like restaurants and bars to have some sort of leverage as a commission where you can say, hey, do some of the stuff we want. Otherwise, we're not going to support your application, or we can really make it hell. And that can be a good thing. Like there are bad faith actors that are poorly managed businesses, and sometimes directly because of alcohol sales, sometimes it's a bit questionable, but they can have an adverse impact on the neighborhood, and it can be really helpful to get in the way of that. Sometimes I've seen this happen where that's not the case. People just don't want things to change, and I've seen it get without getting into details, it gets very tense. Sometimes people have to spend a lot of money on lawyers just to open up a business. And in many cases, at least in my experience, that wasn't particularly fair. And then there's other cases, like for example, Harris Teeter is, they have a location in Adams Morgan. Their time for renewing their liquor license came up. And there's a bunch of stuff that neighbors would say, hey, they could really do these things better. It'd be really helpful if we could get them to do that. So I reached out to them and got in touch with their kind of like corporate legal staff and said, hey, I don't want to like impede how Harris Teeter does. In general, you've been a good neighbor. And regarding alcohol sales, it's not like there's people sitting outside drunkenly on the Harris Teeter steps or anything. It's just coincidentally a point of leverage where it could say, I want to use this as a negotiating chip. Will you meet me with good faith and meet some of these requests? And they did. They were really helpful and really communicative, and we had good conversations. And they said, yeah, these are good points. And we want to be able to sell alcohol. So we'll wash our trash chutes and we'll do the best that we can. And they also explain stuff. A lot of times it's easy to go into an issue thinking, okay, this thing is bad because these people are bad and they're trying to do harm. Like, for example, at the Harris Teeter, people said, hey, the trucks delivering to Harris Teeter are often blocking the street so traffic gets backed up. They got to stop that. I talked to them and they said, yeah, it's because people illegally park in the tiny little zone where the truck physically has to turn in to be able to back into the loading dock. If someone's parking their Lexus right there, they physically can't do that. And that's just someone breaking the law. Or I've seen apartments that are near bars where it's like, oh, the bar must be just negligent with their trash. Let's get in the way of that. Actually, it was an Airbnb where people were just throwing stuff out in the dumpster and just not really caring for where it went, or people that were like short-term renters. And being able to try to figure out what's going on can be helpful. But like one of those opportunities is with the liquor licenses. And it's like there's a lot of nuance that goes into it. There's different types of liquor licenses, like if you can consume on premise or not, if you can sell spirits or just beer and wine, a lot of different things. And it can, like this could go on for hours. There's literally an entire agency that just deals with this. And it can get very tense at moments. But in general, it's like one of those things where if you want to have opportunity to engage with businesses on good faith, that can be a way to do it. And if you want to do it in bad faith, that does happen too. But like a lot of times, this is really helpful, I think. A lot of the business owners don't necessarily know how the process works. And like in my experience, people who are not native English speakers, they're wanting to start businesses. And I platformed, like one of my platform points in 2020 was to make sure that especially people that don't have access to like legal training, all these things, had some sort of support. As commissioner, really the only thing I could do was go down to their store and say, hey, I'll just show you what the paperwork looks like. I can't do it for you. You have to assume all the risks, but I can at least tell you what the bureaucratic stuff is so you don't get scared by that. And many times people said, oh, this is really helpful. I just need to do these 3 different things, or I need to talk to this other coworker or whatever, and they got businesses open. And it was a little bit faster, I think, because rather than seeing the commission as an adversary, which in Adams Morgan's history that happened a lot, where business owners would say, oh, the commission's getting involved, we're going to have to get lawyers and this is going to get ugly. It changed a bit to where people said, oh, the commission's getting involved. This could actually be nice. They're going to help it so that we can be a productive member of the community because we want our neighbors to be our clients. And trying to foster that kind of relationship was really helpful. It's not always easy, but it's possible.
Thank you, Peter. That was a really good overview of what the liquor license renewal and application process can look like for ANCs. Let's take one or two other examples of different other sorts of work that comes across your desk most frequently as a commissioner before we move on. I see Adam's hand.
Yeah, not specifically me, but our ANC in total. We have, I think, and Janelle can correct me in the chat, 4 historic districts in our ANC. So we do get a lot of historic preservation review board applications, which tend to usually just be pretty straightforward. At times they can be a little spicy, where the neighbors are really angry that you won't be able to see their favorite tree that's like 4 houses down. But we do get a lot of HPRB cases. They can be interesting. They're a little tedious in my opinion. And I also just like don't necessarily agree with having to air my architectural designs for my house in a public meeting, but that's just me. We do get a lot of traffic safety concerns, especially with Connecticut Avenue, not necessarily being the safest road in the city. We do get a lot of people asking for crosswalks, for better signage, for better more time to cross the street. I think there was like one intersection where you had like 30 seconds, which not great for people who are disabled or older. And the one thing that I had was I had a public space application that I still have PTSD over, where we were trying to get a dumpster for a grocery store, and one neighbor basically killed the whole project, to the point where the owner of said grocery store has to bring their trash on a dolly across the street, down like 4 blocks to another restaurant's dumpster. But public space, not fun. But the other, not as horrible as some of the other things that you could see as an ENC.
Thank you, Adam. So we don't have time to talk through the bonus question here, but if anyone feels inspired, including commissioners who are joining us in the chat, to share the most niche thing to come across your desk, the most unusual thing to come across your desk, there could be some interesting stories along those lines. Okay, what does it take to be a good ANC? And how do I get there? I want to pose this question to all of the panelists, but I want to just speak to one point that that I know I feel very, very strongly based on my experience serving, and that's the second one around expertise. You don't need to have all the answers. Just be willing to ask questions, do a bit of research, listen and learn. And there is room on your commission for different skill sets. Someone on your commission or a couple people on your commission might be like the historic preservation experts, basically self-appointed, and God bless them. If you are in a historic district, for example, maybe your strength is not the finer points of zoning regulations. Maybe your strength is in community outreach. Maybe your strength is in relationships with small business owners. You don't know who's going to get elected and who all ends up on a commission together, but generally speaking, there's going to be a wide variety of skill sets. And as you build those relationships with other commissioners, they'll teach you things, you'll teach them things, and best case scenario, it can be a really even I think Peter spoke earlier about how you might even have people you have ideological disagreements with, but you kind of like work together pretty effectively or have complementary skills. I found that to play out in reality quite a bit. So, question for all of you, what does it take to be a good ANC, and And how did you build your knowledge and expertise when you stepped into this role? And Huma, let's go with Huma.
I would just say I think you need to have a thick skin. People will say I don't mean to dissuade anyone from running, but I want to be realistic. People will say the wildest stuff to you in person, in email, on the phone, via text message. And I don't mean like so you just have to like develop a real thick skin to be able to deal with it. And I think some of the qualities you've listed are absolutely correct, right? And how to handle it. I also think not responding sometimes is better. There's just no way you're going to be able to counter someone's argument that isn't rooted in facts or reality. And so sometimes there's a way in which you kind of take a minute, a few days, and then respond or choose to engage in a different way. So I would just say like really building a thick skin is like the most important. Thick skin is the most important thing. I think also just knowing that you can't do like you're an ANC commissioner, right? You're not a council member, you're not the mayor, you're not an agency head. And I think knowing that you're not going to be able to get a car towed as much as someone yells at you within 2 hours of the car being parked illegally outside is just not going to happen, right? So again, but I think one thing to that makes you a good ANC commissioner is to be able to kind of figure out how to channel people's energies, right? If they're saying, "Hey, I'm pissed about the snow creeks, right, piling up." Hey, here's a committee hearing. Here's an oversight hearing. Here's where you can testify. Here's a resolution I'm drafting. Can you please weigh in? What do you think I'm missing here? So I think being able to channel some of people's frustration is really, really helpful. I think one last thing I'd say is more than anything, and you find this from when you're running for ANC to when you become an ANC commissioner, is people just really want to be heard. And so being able to give folks like, hey, we heard you, we hear your feedback, we hear your comments, and being able to acknowledge those, I think is like the most important thing. Again, people will fall on every side of the spectrum, right? Whether it's trash cans or bike lanes or bus routes or snow removal or, rodent prevention, right? But being able to say, hey, I hear you, and like this is how we're like moving forward, or here's how I'm taking your feedback is just really helpful too. I think for folks to understand too.
Thank you, Huma. Robbie. Oh, Robbie might have had to step away for a moment.
No,
Oh, there you
I
are.
am. I'm right here multitasking. Whew. Okay, so let's see. A lot of this was a trial and error for me. It was really difficult. One of the things that you will see, unfortunately, is that some commissioners can be very territorial, and not willing to share information right away with you. So you kind of feel like you're out there on a limb all by yourself. But it was just trial and error, just trying to figure out things for myself. Your whole first 2 years will be an absolute learning curve. You probably won't get the hang of it until you run again for it. But if you need help, I'm always there. But for me, it was just trial and error. I didn't have anyone to kind of help me navigate through everything as I should. And I would love to be able to teach other people how to do it.
Thank you, Robbie. Um, Jeff, and we do just for folks, we have a few more slides to get through, maybe like 3 more slides. So there's so much we could say on this topic, but keep it relatively brief.
Another important thing is to know what's going on in your SMD. A lot of or there are a lot of commissioners who have full-time jobs and can't be available most of the day, which creates problems if they're being able to just get out in the neighborhood and see what's what. You get off at work at 5, you're usually not going to want to take a walk around and see what's happening. But it is important to notice what's going on, because you'll notice things like work permits in a vacant business, and be nosy, look at it and see who's applied for it, and that way you get an idea of what's going to come in the pipeline further down from APCA or from zoning or some another agency. If possible, if you're interested, you can use that as a basis for reaching out to them. If you can't communicate during 9 to 5 business hours, make sure you have a way of making up for that, of being available to constituents, being available for dealing with district agencies, because a lot of times you'll have stuff that falls by the wayside, and then people get disappointed or upset when things aren't really happening the way they should. And I'm always also happy to help 2B02 at anc.dc.gov.
Thanks, Jeff. Peter?
So I'll try to be brief too. I mean, there's been really good answers so far, so I don't have to repeat too much. But I think to be a good commissioner, like speaking more generally, two things stick out to me, which are empathy and clarity. I'd say empathy, kind of repeating what people said, which is trying to figure out where people are really coming from. And especially as commissioner, like I think it's common, at least in my experience, for people in the greater DC community to go, oh, this thing is on my mind and I want to do something about it. Local representation matters. What's my local representation? Oh, it's this thing called an ANC. Wow, they have an email address or a phone number. I'll contact them. And they might not necessarily know what your role is. You might have to do a lot of kind of gentle explaining or hand holding. And also, a lot of times people will seem upset in ways that you want to, it's very easy to get drawn into kind of be combative with, but it's really helpful to try to think, okay, what are they really getting at? What are they really upset about? Because a lot of times the thing they contact you is just kind of like the last straw, and what's really going on are deeper dynamics. I've had that happen with cases where I talked through with people who are opposed to things happening in the neighborhood, specific cases, and after going through it with them, they were at the very least able to say, okay, that was helpful because they didn't say this way, but I was finally seen. Someone finally gave me a chance to say my side of things. I disagreed with them and they didn't end up getting what they wanted, but at least they didn't get worse and treat people really badly. So that try to understand where people are coming from and really try to, at least at like a human level, appreciate that. It can be really helpful to just kind of get it so people's fangs are not out, so that you can have adult discussions about looking for a compromise. And the clarity, I think clarity and communication of how you do that is really important, and simplicity is your friend. Because a lot of people, like, it's very easy to go from I have no idea what an ANC is to saying all this jargon inadvertently, and then it's inaccessible without meaning to be to all of these people who are just trying to get their voice listened to. So it's good to speak simply and clearly, but also like going back to campaign season stuff, figuring out what it is you want to run on, what do you want to accomplish to the best that you can find that out, and being clear on what that is. Like people respond, and even people that disagree with you will often do a better job or be more inclined to respect you because you're at least clear with where you stand, as opposed to if you're trying to please everybody, it ends up being problematic even to the people you're trying to support, because it looks like you're not willing to go to bat and at least be clear with who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. And that can be specific. Like sometimes it's I ran for ANC because I wanted this crosswalk to be safer, or it can be more general. Trying to figure out what that question or questions are for you can be really helpful for campaigning, but also so you can feel that you have a direction and organization to when you become a commissioner.
Thank you. And Adam.
Yeah, I'll be quick. So I will say the biggest thing for me was I was lucky enough when I came on the commission that two of the former commissioners that stayed on and we kind of just meshed very well, and we were able to play things off each other. We were able to make sure that everything was kind of covered in terms of like who's updating the website, who's doing X, Y, and Z. And I would always say, like, if you have the opportunity to, or if your fellow commissioners on the same commission are as welcoming and as friendly as they were, like, use that as a resource because they've obviously seen things that you haven't. And I would also say, like, we have the other resources here. I've had the opportunity to work with two mokers that were absolutely amazing. They've gone above and beyond on like any, like the most random. We asked one of them to be in a dunk tank for a community event, and they were in the dunk tank with a community event. So like they're there to be like your help essentially. I mean, like obviously they have a whole ward to take care of. You just have 2,000 people, but they are receptive. They are like use them because they get paid mainly, but they are pretty good at what they do. But also like make sure if you don't have a commission that's willing to have those conversations with you, then reach out to anybody. Like most ANCs are pretty friendly and pretty always happy to help.
Thank you. Peter, I'm going to keep it moving to the next slide.
Can I say for like 5 seconds really, really quickly? Find people that you trust to vent to behind closed doors. That can be really helpful. Don't put it on social media. It makes it so that things are a little bit easier.
Good advice. Okay, what powers do ANCs have formally and informally? We actually got into great weight earlier. So I don't necessarily want to go through this slide. I don't think, not with just 10 minutes left together. But and in addition to what we were talking about, if you're looking at the chat, I think it was Tom, not to put you on the spot, was sending some really helpful messages with the finer points on great weight and what it means that ANCs have great weight and in what contexts, etc. So highly recommend looking at that. This is a phrase that you will hear a lot of as an ANC commissioner. And one of the most common frustrations that I hear from commissioners and frankly experienced myself was this last bullet point here, which is that agencies frequently disregard the great weight that they are supposed to give ANCs in various circumstances. There was this very illuminating report from the DC auditor that goes into the challenges therein. So you're an advisory neighborhood commissioner. You have certain forms of power and authority, but but it's uh, not always recognized the way it is supposed to be. So I will leave that there for now. I think that that could be very much a whole discussion unto itself. Um, what other powers do ANCs have? So we were getting some questions in the chat and in the Q&A that get a little bit more into like the soft power of being an ANC commissioner outside of the formal resolution. And this first section of this slide gets into that a little bit. You have a dc.gov email address when you're an ANC commissioner, and I think that is one of the most powerful things that commissioners have. When you reach out about an issue, uh, you have a higher likelihood of a timely response from an agency or an official than like the typical resident would, and you can use that to your advantage to keep issues that are important to your community from falling by the wayside. Um, Commissions also get an annual allotment from DC government. This is a modest amount of funding that is used for commission operations and can also be used for community grants, subject to certain fairly particular guidelines. We talked a little bit earlier about how some commissions hire administrative help. This is how they do it. It's through their annual allotment of funding. We're not going to talk about liquor licenses anymore. We got into that quite a bit earlier as one of the other powers that ANCs have. But would anyone like to say anything uh, about ANCs as the squeakiest wheel or the annual allotment? I see Robbie's hand up.
Yeah. So there is a time that you are going to have to be aggressive. There's no way around it. You're going to have to put your foot down. You have to know when to turn it on and when to turn it off. You have to know how to do that. But unfortunately, it will come to that. It will come to a head. It will come to a head with DC government agencies. It may very well come to a head with some of the residents that's living in your SMD, and it's most certainly going to come to a head when you're on your commission. So you have to be the squeakiest wheel, and in that, I would say be aggressive, but know when and where and how it's time to dial that back. Now, you're also going to realize that not everyone's vision for your commission area your vision is not going to be everyone else's vision. Some people come on to be commissioners because they're not even to really help people, but because they choose to go in a whole different direction and they have other aspirations for being in other political fields, which is fine. But the goal of a commission is to actually be the voice of the community in which you are to serve. So I would say do that, be very careful. Don't be so trusting. Don't give out too much information because the saying in politics is, you have no friends in politics. So you have to be very careful. But yes, I'll just leave that there.
Thank you, Robbie. Jeff?
Um, it's important to take advantage of council oversight and budget hearings. If you have, if you have issues with agencies, don't just let them go when they don't answer your resolution. Keep a list and document it. And every year, between January and March, we have, or January and April, we have the oversight hearings of how did agencies perform in the prior year. Write testimony, submit that testimony to the written record, and then if you are able to participate in live testimony, either by Zoom or in person, if you can do it. Make sure that your concerns with what an agency is, not doing right by your constituents, then you need to get out there and speak it to the public. And in terms of the on the other side, the other side of the coin is if you see that there are needs that are not being fulfilled for the lack of funding. We're forever hearing that from a lot of agencies. We'd love to do this, but we can't do it because dollars. Put that into your testimony for the budget objective. Also, council members have their own ward level funding requests. Get in front of that with these suggestions about how these agencies can serve the community better. And don't be afraid to develop media contacts. I've been on the airwaves a number of times and a lot of print discussing issues. And it's important, it's a little intimidating if you're not used to public speaking, but to look at it as developing a rapport with someone. You're having a conversation about a particular subject, and present yourself as authoritative in your SMD about issue X or issue Y.
Thanks, Jeff. Huma, you get the last comment on this slide.
I was actually going to go over liquor licenses and settlement agreements. This is actually like a really unfortunate part of how the district sometimes functions is that things that like annoy people about having liquor, whether it's sold or being served at restaurants, like the outstanding issues like trash pickup or the hours and stuff is something that APCA, yes, just, approves as well. But a lot of those like little things around it is stuff that gets settled sometimes in a settlement agreement or in conversations with the applicant, right? So settlement agreements that the ANC will negotiate with a applicant like a bar or a place that's serving liquor, like things like, hey, you have to maintain the sidewalk around the restaurant where you're serving liquor. That's something APCA won't even consider. Like it's not part of their license application, but that's something that the ANC can advocate for, right? So for example, in my SMD, we were happy to support a liquor license application for a new restaurant. But one thing that I put in there is because they had sidewalk tables, is like, hey, you just have to maintain the sidewalk, right? Make sure it's clean, make sure it's well maintained. And, to their credit, they have done that, right? So that's like one of the things that you can really negotiate. So I would say ANC's like liquor licenses, approving and disapproving them, but the settlement agreements really do cover a lot of ground that you think a district agency would cover, but it's actually up to a group of commissioners who will kind of figure out with like what feedback they're hearing and what they've seen in other settlement agreements and kind of cobble together something that works. And that's even more important when it comes to places that sell marijuana products, like licensed cannabis products, because those are also covered by APCA, which is the board that handles alcohol and beverage and marijuana. But sorry, I took a little longer than that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we talked about PUDs already. So we are basically at time. It's 8 o'clock. I want to thank all the commissioners for joining us this evening and want to ask you one last question. And then if you have a couple of minutes to stick around, if there are any remaining questions from attendees, that would be great. But we'll also circulate for attendees in the room. We will circulate contact information to the extent that folks are comfortable with that. So if you want to send follow-up questions, that's also an option. We're all here because we really care about this role. We want the next cohort of ANCs to be as strong as it can be, and the district is better for it. So my last question for the commissioners, in about 5 words or less, why are you an ANC? Or what is most rewarding? What keeps you showing up at the ANC meetings? month over month. Robbie.
My love for people and my love for fighting for the underdog. I really have a problem with the treatment of people in general. I view that as a character flaw. It's not a black thing, a white thing, or any other race thing. To me, it's a character thing. And that's what I look at. And I just want the best life that a person can have in this lifetime. We have enough to deal with. I think home life should be easy. I think going around in your neighborhood should be easy. And that's what I fight for.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Adam.
I will say it is my love for my community. I have met so many great people doing this, and as much as I wish that somebody would take this volunteer role away from me at times, I just can't get enough. I love meeting people. I love hearing everybody's issues and trying to fix them. It's my favorite part of this role.
Jeff.
Like Robbie and Adam already said, loving the community, and for me too, it's leaving my mark on the city. I mean, we've done a number of resolutions that have turned into action that have actually made changes for people, and making it easier for getting around, by the bus or the subway, having some of our street problems fixed, and also some things for leading the city forward, in terms of environmental concerns, and fighting back with DDOT. I'm sorry, DDOT, well, no, DDOT, but that's not the story. But with Pepco and Washington Gas that are, abusing our residents right and left. But I've been part of that movement to move it forward. And it's not all necessarily my ANC role, but it's related to, it started in the ANC and it's kind of sprung from there. So if caring about the city it really needs to be your overriding goal.
Thank you, Jeff. Huma, do you have any uh, thoughts? Oh, you're muted.
Making a tangible difference, advocating for making a tangible difference.
Thank you. And Peter?
Say 5 words or less. I'd say knowing and growing your community. Like if the commissioners at the end of the day don't have that much power, but we can do things that, literally and figuratively grow where we live. And at the very least, if you want to learn a lot, meeting people, knowing places, getting to know history, understanding how things work, you can learn a lot if you want to. It just takes a little bit of gumption.
Thank you. Thank you again to the panelists who joined us. Thank you to everyone who came tonight, who's thinking about running. It's a big decision. I hope you feel a little bit more resourced to make that decision. And we definitely encourage you to run, and encourage you to get involved with your commission, with committees. It's really rewarding. It's really meaningful. It is definitely a labor of love, and I personally highly recommend it. Thank you all so much.